Thank you to all my panelists. Thank you for accommodating that slightly earlier start in the panel discussion than what we planned. Obviously, we ran out of gyan to give in the first hour, so we ended up having to get you guys to come in and give us some gyan. So thank you for accommodating that requirement. So I have with me, as Hugo announced, Vishak Kumar. Vishak is actually the CEO for Madura Fashion and Lifestyle. Vishak has very much been part of the fashion industry, and I've known him to be a part of the fashion industry, I think now for close to about 25 years when I first met him. So he has been a stalwart in the Aditya Birla Group in the fashion and lifestyle segment, and currently heads the business. We have with us also Dhruv Bogra. Dhruv's a country manager for Forever New India and Southeast Asia. As you know, Dhruv is not just a fashion aficionado and a business leader, but Dhruv is also what you might define as an endurance cyclist. I'm sure he didn't endure the cycling, but if you think about somebody who cycled from the northernmost part of North America to the southernmost part of South America, then please meet Dhruv Bogra. And Dhruv's written a book about it, which I'm sure you all can catch up on, but he can tell you a lot of stories about the different things that happen. Devraj Iyer. Devraj is actually the CEO of Lifestyle International. As you know, Lifestyle is one of the most successful department store chains in India and has been in operation now for close to about 25 years, from whatever I do remember. And Devraj is now the CEO for the Lifestyle International department store business. I know we all in the department store business share the agonies of various kinds of lockdown-induced closures, mall-related closures, but I'm sure we all look forward to the future with anticipation. Gunjan Shah. Gunjan is also somebody who moved from the fashion space to the footwear space and is the CEO for Bata India. Gunjan has been in the fashion industry for quite a while, and currently, I'm sure, is battling with the challenges of making sure that more people who work from home actually wear footwear as opposed to the comfortable styles that they adopt. Mohit is actually the CEO for Gravis Foods Private Limited. One of the most popular brands that you know there is Baskin Robbins, and of course, Mohit has been a part of the consumer accessories, the retail, and also the consumer brands business for a long while. Both Dhruv and Mohit are people who have been my colleagues at Titan. So it's certainly a pleasure to have them here on this particular panel. Manish is, of course, Manish Sabnis is the Chief Business Officer of JioMart B2B Grocery Reliance Retail Limited. Manish has actually been part of the B2B retail business for a while. He's previously been with Metro, and now post Metro, he's actually joined JioMart. And as you know, Reliance and JioMart have got huge ambitions in terms of what they want to do with with what you might define as the opportunity to be able to connect the traditional retailer with the customer. And JioMart is obviously going to play a large role in this. All of them have actually experienced the pandemic and the lockdown in some manner or the other. And they've experienced stores which have closed. They've experienced businesses which have actually declined in terms of revenues. They've experienced the challenges of managing cash flows. They've experienced the hard decisions that they've had to take about people. They've been posed with questions like, how do I reorganize in order to be able to meet the new requirements of the business? How do I ensure that my business transforms in order to be able to capture the opportunities that digital technologies afford? And in case I were to convert myself from merely being an offline player to an omni-channel player, then what are some of the changes that I need to make in terms of my structure, and what are the investments that I need to make in the organization? each one of these business leaders actually epitomizes business leadership at its best. They've stayed the course, they've gone through the tough times, they have helped to be able to adapt the organization to the challenges that they are facing in the marketplace, and they're all survivors. As Dhruv always says, grit is the hallmark of a leader. And this is something that you've clearly seen amongst these leaders in all of these situations, that they have actually displayed grit of a very, very high order. So what I'd like to do is to be able to pose a question to several of these panelists, because when March 2020 happened, and when the Prime Minister announced that we are going to be entering a lockdown phase, which is approximately about 2 weeks, we didn't know whether it is going to be 2 weeks or more, but we all believe that that is 2 weeks. And as business leaders, we realize that we have to close our stores, effectively close our sources of revenue. Yet, on the other hand, we were going to be responsible for keeping our companies afloat. We had to make sure that we had enough money to be able to pay the salaries of our employees. We had to make sure that we had to pay off the suppliers whose payments had come due, to pay the statutory dues, though there was some concession announced by the government. But there were very, very crucial people decisions that we had to take. Stores are closed. What do we do about our employees? How do we make sure, if there are no revenues, that salaries can continue to be paid? How do we know the kind of things that employees in the stores could actually be repurposed to doing? And I don't like to use the word repurposed, but the point is that people had to play new roles in the context of the stores being actually closed. How do we make sure that if employees are outside of the organization and we can't see them, we can only talk to them, how do we ensure that they remain connected with the organization when they are working from home? How do we ensure that, when they are working from home, that productivity does not suffer? How do we ensure that if they're not within the same cubicle, that teams, virtual teams, continue to get created? And finally, at the end of it, tough decisions around how much can you afford in terms of costs, such that you maintain the organization through this difficult phase. So I'd like to first address this question to Vishak, but certainly that is not the last answer on this. I'd also like to hear the others talk about it. So Vishak, if you think of yourself in that situation in March 2020, think about what went through your mind and how did you decide on several of these aspects that I just amplified on.
Okay, thanks for this, Biju, and thanks for setting it up beautifully. It's always a pleasure being in a panel where you're there. I think you've touched upon all the issues which have been challenges for most of us in the last year and a half. It's easier to decide once you're clear whether your employees are your resources or your employees are your stakeholders. If you go with employees as resources, sure, you would optimize resources. Okay, but if you say that they are at some level non-negotiable stakeholders, the compass becomes a lot easier to navigate with. At least in our organization, we took that call that employees are vital stakeholders along with shareholders that we need to take along in those difficult times. So there were, like you rightly said, tough calls to be made because there was a reality that there wasn't any business coming through. Stores were shut, right? Cash flows were under stress and so on. What we chose to do was to say that, look, our employees are our vital stakeholders and that we will work in the principle of fairness. Okay. and with disproportionate amount of transparency in everything that we do. Led to a series of Biju, I remember a time when I was standing on the street in 100 Feet Road with a huddle outside of all our store managers of 100 Feet Road, some 7 of us together. And I said, "Kya karna chahiye? Okay, what should we do? What's the right thing to do with our front end staff?" Everybody respected the fact that we'll not lay off. And everybody volunteered that, look, don't worry about doing salary cuts. We'll deal with it together. Okay. But we really respect the fact that you don't want to discriminate different kinds of people at this point of time. Okay. And that you're saying, let's do it. And then we took a cut, which was top down, which means the highest level people took the heaviest cuts and so on. It was done very transparently, fairly, including we had a policy for those who did not want to come to stores at that point of time. Okay, because parents said don't go to the store and so on. We created a policy for them also so that it was easy for them. Net, we said that, look, let's do what's fair. We created a project Lakshya, which was essentially about what you said about reskilling. And the thing was this, a whole lot of jobs were not really required for a few months. Okay. And there was another set of jobs where there was huge effort and huge action even as we did this. For example, suddenly we were selling huge number of masks. Okay. A product we had no, how do you create an organization for selling masks, for making masks and so on? You had to redeploy a whole, and create some of that stuff. So entire period of Project Lakshya, we had about 600 people who were redeployed temporarily. And so that was again something which we did. And I think it was useful for the individual. They also learned a new skill. Just think about how do you monitor people when they are working from home? Simple answer is you don't and you shouldn't. It's if you are clear about the accountability, responsibility of each individual, and if you have a performance-based organization which basically says, hey, you've got your responsibility, you deal with it, you deliver, people find their ways of doing it. And to that extent, I think, yeah, I mean, there might be somebody who had their own challenges, who had their own constraints, and yeah, but by and large, I think people also responded to the fact that we had faith in them and that we believed in them. Okay, so I have hogged a lot of airtime, so maybe I'll let some of the others answer some of the other questions you posed.
Maybe Dave can add to what Vishak mentioned about, what were some of the thoughts that went through your mind at that point of time.
Yeah, sure, Vijay. So, to be very honest, right? So when this hit us, all of us were taken completely aback, right? And I think we took a few decisions there. Today, we have the benefit of hindsight. So we are in a position to say what we did was right or wrong. But at that point in time, when a situation like this hits you, as an organization, you react in a certain way. And at that point in time, you believe that's the right thing for the organization. So the first thing when it hit us was, it's a matter of 2 to 3 weeks. We are all in this together. We will come out of it, right? That was the first going in position. But all of us know after 3 weeks became 6 weeks, 2 months, 3 months, and that's when concerns were there. Let me not just talk about the first wave. I think I will also add the second wave to it because the responses between the 2 waves were very, very different. In the first wave, the concern was how soon are we going to get revenues? The other thing was, while stores were shut, it wasn't as if business was shut because online started growing significantly. So much so that was growing at like 200, 300%. And we suddenly realized we didn't have the right skill set in such a short period of time to reskill to service that demand, right? So that was one big challenge as an organization we had to go through because online, which was just 2-3% of our overall business, suddenly became 10-15% of our business. And we needed a huge amount of shift of manpower, reskilling, and things like that. That was number one. Second was, none of us were, stores were shut, offices were shut. So how do we have common meetings? So the way technology started playing a role, and not every member in our organization was technology enabled. For example, all meetings started happening in Teams and Meet, Google Meet. So to actually educate people that this is how you download the app. I'm talking of store managers. I'm talking of store staff across the country, right? Tier 1 metro towns, tier 2 towns, to bring this organizational change so that all of us could come together. How do we have an open house? The first, open house, unthinkable that you would do it virtually without any physical people. So how do you organize an open house so that the leadership team, one by one, can communicate to the floor staff, to the regional staff, to the warehouse staff, supply chain staff? How do we communicate this message that intention was there, but how do we communicate this intention that you're all there, don't worry, we are in it together? So this was a massive challenge. And I think, and sometimes I really think, they say necessity is the mother of invention. So all of us innovate, all of us were forced to a corner, and we had no choice but to come up with solutions to sort of overcome this. So that is, I think, if you really ask me, I think every organization has innovated in its own ways and have come out of it. They've found their own individual solutions to grapple with things. But in the second wave, our entire focus shifted to care. It was not about retaining people. It was more about care, because that was devastating. So we are losing lives. Everybody, our friends, our near and dear ones, someone either in your family or your friend circle or your professional life had lost life. So we quickly moved to, how do we cover medical expenses? How do we cover insurance? So if somebody in the store has lost a near and dear one, how do we protect their livelihood? So the entire focus moved from operations to protecting people and protecting livelihoods. So we had to launch the landmark Suraksha, which took care of employees' medical expenses. Even if you lost a key young spouse or a child, take care of your medical, take care of education, spouse income, etc. So the entire focus in the second wave moved to care rather than how to operate, because by then we found some solutions of how to operate during this pandemic. So yeah, that's how, in hindsight, yeah, maybe we could have done even more. Yeah, I think we are better prepared, certainly well prepared for the future. But yeah, it's been great lessons the last 1.5 years.
Great. They said that, this COVID pandemic was once in a century experience. So hopefully, whatever lessons we've learned from this can be captured for posterity, and maybe somebody else can use it in the 22nd century when something similar like this happens. Going to you, Dhruv, and I think if I were to borrow the title of your book, which is Grit, Gravel and Gear, from whatever I do remember, which was kind of epitomizing, in a sense, how you prepared, what you went through, and what were some of those, what you might call as inner strengths that one had to draw on. And when you think of yourself in March 20, and when you think of, what exactly were some of the thoughts that went through your mind at that point of time about, at two levels, one about your own and at the level of your employees, and the second is also about the business and the existence of the business. So how did you think about all these things?
Well, Viju, thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak on this subject. Like you mentioned earlier, I believe grit is really a very important facet in the way we take these decisions. And what I underwent in that journey over a period of 18 months or so, I think everything just kind of started, unfolding in front of my eyes at that point in time about how to handle this crisis. Things like, for example, how do you anticipate, how do you ensure the safety of your employees, what to expect next. these things just suddenly started, emanating from within me, and through me, I think we were able to sort of get it across to all the employees within the organization. Much before the decision to shut down the country was announced, we were already in the process of instituting many health and safety measures within the organization. Face masks, face shields had already started in the stores in early March. We had already moved to a hybrid work model in March, much before that. But the speed and suddenness of the decision from the top, I think, did leave us baffled and puzzled and also surprised and shocked, just like the others just expressed. So one of the first things that we did, which was our priority, was to ensure the health and safety of our employees and have an overarching embrace in terms of reassuring them that we were going to be there for them, and that whatever it was we were going to be facing, we would face it together. So I think that's one of the first things we did. Subsequently, a little bit down the line, we realized that this is something that is really going to become far more serious than we anticipated. We quickly set up COVID emergency response teams, both for retail and both for our own staff in the back end. For Revenue is not a very large company with a big footprint like some of the other players here, other brands here, but we are present in over 30 cities with our own employees. We don't have franchisees, so we have to take care of that boy in Karnal or that boy in Pathankot sitting in the concession store and ensure that he's safe. And if I were to respond to your question both across both the waves, the second wave was horrifying. It was terrible. At one point in time, we had 1/4 of the organization, the front end, down with COVID at one point in time, and about 15 to 20% of our back office as well. So we had people whose parents were running out of oxygen. We had some deaths as well. So this was all quite traumatic for many people. And one of the challenges that we faced was how to ensure the mental health of our teams. That became the big challenge, on top of all the other challenges around inventory, sales, e-commerce, digital acceleration. All the back-end work was going on. But on top of all this was this overarching importance of having to keep the team together from a mental health point of view. I think that's where the quality of grit came in. And, what I think this whole crisis, like it is during war, has exposed to people something very beautiful about themselves, that we all have this capability to be tenacious, to be gritty, to be able to overcome anything. And, like I mentioned to you yesterday, boys became men and girls became women. And that is where that situation leadership that started emanating from the bottom was really very heartwarming to see. So yes, I mean, we went through a whole process like the others did about how do we safeguard salaries, try to avoid layoffs, take salary cuts ourselves, the steepest at the top kind of thing, and do everything else. But on top of everything that we were doing, what mattered the most to us was the wellness and mental health of our employees. And we did many things around engagement, training, upskilling, reskilling, starting April of 2020, going up to, it goes on even now, actually, because we're still in a hybrid model. And it's been I think, a chiseling moment for everyone. And people have discovered qualities that they never had. We've had people take on new roles. We've had staff become super customer experience specialists with, WhatsApping to customers, asking about their health, going out of the way to help their colleagues, running around for oxygen. I think this has been a tremendous moment in our country's history, world's history, but also for our organizations. And a lot of amazing things are going to come out of this experience for a lot of people.
True. And as many say, you needed this crisis for us to discover our inner selves and realize how capable we all were, and what were the things that we could pull out. On the other hand, you never wish for a crisis like this at all, because
Exactly.
this is not something that you really want to happen. So in some senses, it kind of helped fashion us and steel us. And yet, on the other hand, it was not the best way to be able to help fashion us. So I think that's kind of interesting. Let me now switch to another question, because I think, as Vishak mentioned in his open house on 100 Feet Road, he was speaking with all of his store heads and asked, "Karna kya hai?" And I think that was where the first question comes to a lot of people, saying that, what do we do now? And one of the most important things when a lot of us are running principally offline businesses is about the staff in the stores in a situation where stores are closed. Uh, there are some opportunities which lay ahead of us, which was in terms of if you're in the restaurant business, a delivery model, if you're in maybe a fashion space after the initial period of time, then an omni model. If you're in the B2B space and people are afraid to walk into your stores, though you are allowed to open your stores, then obviously an opportunity to be adopting a delivery model. So let me first swing to Gunjan and ask him. And at that point of time, I think Gunjan, you weren't in Bata as yet when it first came in. But then I'm sure during the second wave, you probably experienced it a little more. But what did you think about it from a people's perspective? You know, how do I ensure that my people are kept productive? How do I preserve their employment on the one hand while ensuring that they are adding value to the organization on the other hand? And what are the tools that you used at that point of time in order to ensure that you could add value? Whether it is redeployment, re-energize, re-engage, whether you're going to be retraining or whatever else that you did, what were some of the things that you had done in order to be able to make sure that you kept them completely productive and value adding?
Oh, great, great. Thanks, Biju. And thanks for the opportunity to speak here. No, you're right. I think, obviously, I think the panelists before this have spoken, right, of the employee first, about the care piece, etc. Right. I think the key point that, I would like to and respond on your point also, Biju, is that, I think employee engagement was a big challenge. In a way is currently also somewhat of a challenge. So it's, I think, ameliorating a little as time goes by. But however, I think there were a few things that we tried to do, right? And we, as of now, I don't think we have crossed the journey. I don't think I can also answer your question saying that they're fully productive from a true productive sense, right, in financial metrics, right? But I think there were some initiatives and efforts that we tried to do towards that. And I'm sure everyone's tried to do something on those fronts. One of those, I think the biggest thing was that, a lot of age-old practices got challenged, right? In the way meetings are done, the frequency at which interactions happen, the frequency at which I even now do town halls, etc. Despite the fact that we have seen some semblance of normalcy, I think has gone up dramatically compared to, pre-COVID, etc. What this is also thrown up is a lot of opportunities, I think, especially during the first wave and the second wave during the lockdown of, upskilling and training. So I think there was a lot of work that happened towards, making sure that people were not only reskilled, right? That was a limited opportunity that you could do for a set of people, etc. But also making sure that they were upskilled and refreshed to get ready for whenever, things get back to some kind of an operation back again. And I think a lot of work went behind training and development, right? I think the reskilling piece is valid. One example was given of a category that exploded. I think similarly for us in terms of challenges that exploded, right? There were various ways and means that we tried to reach out to consumers. If consumers could not come to us in our stores since they were shut, etc., or they were reluctant to come out. The other big piece, I think, that also helped, in terms of getting this engagement going, right, I think, is also this entire piece which was to do around community. And a lot of work went behind it, while obviously I think during the heat of the wave of April, May, June of the second wave especially, right, I think a lot of people were obviously personally impacted. But I think there was a disproportionate effort in parallel to this that we tried to put to communities around us. And I think that also added in terms of, the bonding as well as the community feeling within the organization and the employees. And that, I think, that plus the employee first policy that has already been talked about by others, I think does stand us in good stead, and hopefully does result in basically a better belonging to the organization, as well as better morale going forward as things get back to normal, and as we wish all together that we don't see this again.
Thanks, Gunjan. And Manish, if I were to switch to you, you were in the essentials category. And because you were in the essentials category at that point of time with Metro, obviously you had your stores open, but one of the biggest challenges were that many of your customers who are smaller store people, they were closed, and many others were afraid to even venture out of their homes and travel distances to come to stores. So how did you think of it at that point of time in terms of, the full complement of employees being available to you, yet on the other hand, the full complement of customers not being available to you?
Thanks, Biju, and thank you for the opportunity. It was a very strange situation. It was that groceries was classified as essentials. So you were keeping your stores open. And it wasn't as if all the employees were coming, because at the entry level, you tend to get a lot of people, let's say in Bangalore, who are from the Northeast, etc. And with hostels having closed down, shared accommodation having shut down, we actually found a lot of our employees had gone away. In fact, I was getting into a partnership with the companies which had non-essentials, whose stores were shut. And we actually started talking directly, I mean, I was not really an HR leader, but, it didn't matter. As somebody who was responsible and on the board of that organization, we straight away picked up phones and called up our contacts and said, can we have temporary associates joining us? Because it was very good for, serving our customers. It was very good for the PNL. So rather than let go of associates from those companies, they could come and work for Metro Cash and Carry. Secondly, the other thing we found is, none of the restaurants or dhabas, etc., were open. So while our associates were in the stores, we actually had to make sure that we ran our canteens even more, not just for our employees. So we ensured them that we didn't make any distinction between employees, security guards, off-roll employees. We even gave us special allowance. We organized cars, got them in. We ensured them that they would get a hot meal. We thanked them for whatever they had done. We obviously first made sure that they were very, very clear that just because we were essentials, we were not really pushing them to come to work. We made sure we convinced them. There is a bit of an advantage that Metro stores had because the aisles were really wide than some other companies. So we made doubly sure that they were very assured. We started a token system for at any point of time inside a 50,000 square feet store. We ensured how many customers can actually come in, and we really regulated that. Second, we also made sure that for customers who are not very comfortable, we organized something like a grocery combo, and we kept those typical combos outside so that they didn't really need to come. We had large parking lots, so employees came in, they picked up their combos. We also stepped up delivery. At that time, e-com was something which was not a very big part of Metro's business, so we scaled that up really. So lots of learning around that time. We also felt that just to keep our stores working, a lot of people thought that because it was grocery, everything would run smoothly or the stores would open. But we really discovered that, there was a central government diktat, then there was a state government, and then the local district level magistrate, the IS, could actually have a completely different set of rules. So we really empowered our senior store managers. So unlike, let's say, some of the retail store managers, the Metro store manager handles anywhere from 250 to 500 crores of turnover. So we really empowered them to go and talk to the government officials, and that really helped. So in touch with the IS officer, the medical health officer, and there were stores which kept getting open, kept getting shut, and we had to work through all the shifts. So huge amount of learning. But in this second lot, in my second innings here, in the second pandemic with Reliance JioMart, we realized that, all of our associates, so there were only two areas. One was the warehouses, where there was a concentration of employees who worked. And again, at those kind of basic levels, people work and live out of shared accommodation. So there were lots of occasions where 3 or 4 people get infected and the whole infection spreads. So we had to shut down some of our facilities, and every single day we had to track how many are, detected with some kind of temperature, how many have to be sent back home. We moved from, let's say, a 2-shift operation to a 3-shift operation. We kept a shifts gap between the two, and so on and so forth. In the month of May, I remember some of the FMCG companies made a call saying that, whoever is working in the field, they just pulled out their team. So we tried to work with it for a while, and then in the month of May, all 6,000 sales officers of ours we pulled. And that was another you asked a question about productivity. So it was difficult to measure productivity. So from home, these guys started making calls, and I think they really responded to the clarion calls. Being a grocery business in this innings as well, it was all essentials. So in fact, the demand went up. So we had to really, stock up. Most of the others were stocking down, we were stocking up, and our productivity actually went up. So we had to really manage that, work from home, measuring productivity when a sales guy is making calls and completing the call versus actually going on a beat plan. So these were very different learnings in the second round. And as some of the other panelists have said, the focus was more about if somebody was hospitalized, if some oxygen cylinders had to be done. So the focus was more about care. It was also about vaccination. So we said that minimum first round, everybody should be covered by vaccination. Otherwise, you're not putting those guys back in the market, irrespective of the impact on the revenue. And it was, I think, in those times and now looking back, the right decision, because employers did value us, saying that this is an organization who's worried about me more than, let's say immediately what revenue I'm delivering. So it's not that I'm treated as a resource, but as somebody who's really valuable. So great experience. And also this period has shown us who's an armchair leader and who's a real leader in the market. I think that really clearly showed the distinction, and these are very valuable lessons.
Thanks, Manish. And I think a fair number of points which I'm capturing from all of the contributions so far has largely been around the fact that employee was priority one. While in fact you optimized around the organizational sustainability and continuance, most people, in fact everybody here so far, has talked about how they ensured that they took care of their employees, looked after them, made sure that their needs were met, made sure that from a health and safety perspective, things were done, extended the reach to beyond the employees, but also connected with their families, and ensured that employee as a figure of employment, or whether you talk about it from a resource perspective, or whether you talk about it from a set of skills, was seen in a very, very different perspective than merely a statistic. So I think that's a great thing to understand about, and I think a great thought to be expressing in the beginning of MMR 2021. Mohit, I wanted to check with you about one aspect. All of us, when we think about how we've lived our own lives in the last 18 months, we worked from home. Those who have children in school have seen their children study from home. We can't go to a theater, so we watched entertainment at home. We can't go to a restaurant, so we ordered food at home. We've done almost everything that we would normally have done outside our homes, in our homes. And for a lot of this, we actually use technology. Our employees are consumers just like all of us. And when we think of offices in the future, do we ever think that we should actually go back to an office that we used to have in the past, where people come in at 9 o'clock in the morning, leave at 5:30, 6 in the evening, come in for 5 or whatever number of days in a week, come in specifically and sit in a particular corner or in their designated space, travel long distances to come into an office? Or if we are confident that they will continue to remain productive, as Vishak mentioned in the beginning, we don't worry about that, then why do we ever need to think of it as an office that we need to have in the future? Or even if we do need to have an office for any statutory reasons, how will we think of this office as a place for employees to come in?
Biju, thanks first of all for having me on the panel, and thanks for your question. So I will look at the question possibly in a couple of ways. you are right that, when employees kind of come back to office, they question some of the older ways of doing things, etc. Some things that we were used to, for example, working all days of the week, or working from a 9 to a 5, or whatever the timings might be. And some of those admin things might be questioned. You're absolutely right. However, there is a debate around the quality of decisions, the quality of interaction that you're able to have online versus offline, etc. And in my own mind, to be honest, let me share the background here. We as an organization have been working from the office pretty much since last September, or maybe last August. I don't even remember. We've been forever working, from our offices. This year, in the month of April and May, we kind of again worked from home, and then we again came back to the office. One of our realizations has been that the quality of interaction that we are able to have, the value of those, quick meetings at the coffee machine, or at the water cooler, etc. Those are invaluable, absolutely invaluable. The kind of culture that you're able to build across the organization with people meeting with each other is far more, or is far better than what you're able to do online. While there is obviously, quantum of work that you're able to accomplish sitting at your home, it possibly can be done slightly better when you are in the office. That's what our realization as a company has been. This does not mean that we do not encourage working from home, or we do not encourage flexi timings, etc., etc. Those are things obviously we are trying to incorporate into our working. One of the more important things that has come to the fore, and obviously that's a point made by some of the panelists earlier, is how online sales, or how the proportion of online sales to total sales has gone up. So if I was to think in terms of an organization of the future, I would imagine that what we call digital dexterity would be absolutely key, as a skill to have across functions, across employees, across levels. It would not be something that is specific to a particular function, or a particular employee, or a particular level. That is something that I see as one big change that is coming into an organization setup. The other is in terms of the way we connect with each other. Yes, you're right that earlier there was a certain way of connecting. We would physically travel into markets and into stores, etc. And we are discovering that possibly a lot of that may not be required at the frequency with which it was being done earlier. So you can cut down on your travel, you can cut down on some of your market visits, and still be in touch with the markets. One of the initiatives that we took, possibly maybe later than some of the others have, is, while we were connected through, platforms like Zoom or Google Meets, etc., we have also enabled all our employees with what we call a mobile app-based meeting platform, which is essentially Workplace by Facebook. Now, here we are able to upload pictures. All our store guys are able to upload pictures of their stores, able to put up initiatives, which can be seen at the central level, and inputs can be given either for improvement or for correction or whatever. So those are small initiatives that we have taken as an organization to ensure that people stay connected. Something that we could never imagine 5 years ago, having a dealer conference, which is online. So, those are things that we have done. Now, launching new products doesn't necessarily mean that you go out into a market and physically introduce it. Obviously, there's a level of enthusiasm that can build, but it can also be done online. So those are some of the changes that we have brought in. But as I said, for me, and specifically for our organization, I think being in the office and working from the office will still be invaluable. Maybe the number of days is something that we can look at. Having digital skills will be absolutely paramount. Yes, we can look at some of, still controlling some of our meetings, etc., physical meetings, and replacing them with virtual meetings, but it would not go away completely.
So what I'm hearing from you is the fact that there is an opportunity to be able to build a hybrid organization.
Absolutely.
There is no need to have an office to ensure that your employees work, but there are softer aspects around building culture, creating engagement. where
I think there is one
creating
more.
learning.
I think there is one more point that I'd like to make, Biju, and this is around some of the more routine, mundane jobs in the organization. So, if you ask me about an organization of the future, what I would say is that possibly some of the more traditional jobs would possibly get outsourced because the organization doesn't necessarily add value to those roles, and organizations would want to consolidate and focus only on their core jobs. So, for example, if as an organization, our core job is manufacturing, selling, and distribution, and possibly marketing, then that is what we would concentrate on. And non-core jobs like possibly IT or possibly finance or possibly some of the other jobs like that, like IT, finance, HR. Yeah, those are the 3 or 4 that I can think of. Those can get possibly outsourced, and which possibly places larger focus on the quality of individuals that we want in the functions that we want to retain and in the functions that we want to outsource.
Sure. So Vishak, if I were to come to you, and leading on from what Mohit mentioned about the organization of the future, and if we all believe that we will not go back to the organization of the past, which is, let's say, for example, hierarchical, command and control, with several levels which are there, decision making normally taken at the top, done at the top, etc., etc. Then how do we ensure that when we think of the organization of the future, what are some of the characteristics that we would visualize in the org of the future? Vishak, you're on mute.
Yeah. Yes, Biju, I think you gave some answers in the question, but I'll try to still share what I think is my understanding of the organization in the future. It's evolving. First things first, and I will build on what Mohit said. I haven't built a new work relationship in the last 1.5 years with anybody who I did not have a strong bond with before COVID. So this, Mohit talked about culture. I think it's a very, very vital part of being an organization, which is a set of people with a common purpose, who get along very well with each other, understand each other. It's, at least with current technology, this can be only a force multiplier. It can't be the force in itself. So that's part one, which is that you can't, at least with current context, you can't replace the physical office or the need for people to get together physically. Having said that, I think it'll be a shame to not utilize some of the benefits that we've seen into new ways of working. And I think good organizations must imbibe. By the way, MS Teams existed 3 years back also. And, our IT teams used to try and encourage so many people to, please try this. It's easy, it works, and so on and so forth. And you would do that once or twice. And
many say that COVID was the chief digital transformation officer.
Absolutely, it was. So no doubt, I think it accelerated everything by 10 years. A lot of things it should have probably taken much more time to do so. So clearly there is a physical world that we were familiar with. There is a force multiplier which technology is giving you. There is also a work from anywhere, and to that extent, hence, a lot more coordination becoming possible, net connections being possible. And with all of that, scalability also becomes relatively easier. You no longer have to create constraints around physical spaces and offices and so on. As you're looking at scalability, it becomes a lot easier to be able to do some of those things. It requires, like Mohit said, a vastly different digital mindset. And it's a very cliched, bandied around term right now, so one needs to be careful not to fall for those cliches. And yet there is a role that technology is going to play disproportionately in all our lives, whether it's in commerce, whether it's in work processes, whether it's in even automation of routine processes, and so on. So, for example, e-commerce catalogs. Do you need to do physical shoots, or can you do digital draping? Now, these all become part and parcel of ways of life, right? And organizations will have to be able to adapt to that and be able to make the most of it. It also requires very different capabilities of people. At one level, you require people who are multi-skilled, and more than anything else, have the learning ability to take on new skills fast. So one of the things that, and I know that in your audience you have a lot of HR heads, one of the things that you need is HR heads who look for learning ability, because you will need to keep adapting, keep doing new things. Probably the rate of change would be faster than before as you go along. The organization of the future is also going to be a lot more flexible in terms of what it does, how, command and control, Biju, anyway was going, okay, with a lot of information democracy, anyway, a lot of those things were going away. I think this has only accelerated that change. It will be a lot more of set of people with a common purpose as the organization of the future.
Thanks. Thank you. And Gunjan, if I were to swing to you with let's say leading on from what Vishak mentioned, and he mentioned that several characteristics that he described. Would we think of, and since we've got a large audience of HR people, I'd like you to address it from a HR perspective. What do you think will be the role of the HR organization? Will it be the classic recruit, train, engage, performance management, retire, that whole cycle, or will it be any different in the future, given how the organizations will also be different?
Yeah, no, first is let me assure the HR folks out there that we are surely not going to outsource the HR function. Right, I'm sure, I think, obviously there are repetitive tasks, and that's what Mohit was hinting towards, but just a reassurance wherever required. But I think, Biju, on your question, as well as I think, also taking forward from what, I think Vishak mentioned, I think there will be, see, it's not as if, things are, people are going to go away. As long as people are there, HR is there. Right. So the primary role of HR in any organization is people and people centric, right? And people will be there. They will be in different forms, right? As already has been said very well by Mohit and Vishak, right? There will be different skill sets. There will be different attitudes. There will be, you will dial up on certain parameters that you want from people, right? And I think that's something that HR will play a role. Right. Yes, there will be repetitive tasks, etc., which might get out of the way, right? Which were anyways getting out. It's not as if, I think it's something earth-shatteringly new, right? It's just that it's accelerated now. People have learned to do it. People on all sides in the ecosystem have learned how to adjust to, new ways of working. You can, you can log into somewhere, get your questions answered, get your own, information that you require. You don't need to go to some, you don't need to keep an HR guy to respond to those kind of things. There are chatbots available. So my sense is, Biju, that repetitive tasks go away. However, the core function of HR, which is people and people management in the organization, will remain. Obviously, oriented towards the new skill sets required. And I think that was well summarized. I think, technology affinity, I think, is going to be very, very critical across, I think was mentioned already, across all kinds of people in the organization. Agility in terms of mindset is going to be very, very critical, right? Change is only going to come faster. So I think these will get dialed up, but however, the role will continue.
Sure. Thanks, Gunjan. And Dev, just swing an audience question to you. One of the questions asked by the audience is that when we think about reinventing the organization and making it digital first, as many of you all have described, do we think of any unforeseen costs which come with making an organization digital first?
Yeah.
Hopefully you have foreseen it. but
Yeah.
that's why I'm asking you the question.
I think it's a very interesting question because nobody viewed this in this fashion. So I think it's quite interesting. So I think digital is here to stay, and I think while COVID has brought in huge negative repercussions on business, on people, like we are discovering in the panel today, there are also a lot of positives. So we are learning to work smarter. We are learning to work more efficiently. And we're doing all this through digital. So therefore, that's here to stay. What are the trade-offs? I think the biggest one is the skilling of people to be technology enabled. So we don't need technologists. We need people who are open to embracing technology. So we don't need coders, we don't need software technologies. We just need people who are just willing to experiment, willing to do new things using technology. So it could be as simple as working through your mobile phone, downloading apps, moving things faster through some of these new software that's available. So I don't see a huge trade-off in digital. In fact, I only see positives coming through digital because it's only bringing in more efficiency to the organization.
Sure. Thanks. Thank you. And Dhruv, one last audience question for you, which is in terms of driving change. I think they've talked about change, driving change. If you find that people are resistant to change, as you visioned it out, but you find that they are reluctant to actually change, either to learn or to adopt, then what are some of the challenges? How do you address this challenge? Is a question that has been asked by an audience member. Dhruv, you're muted.
Yeah, it's a good question because this was a time in our history in which change was thrust upon us when people least expected it at the speed at which it came. And change, by the way, is a way of life, and you have to adapt to the ability to adapt to change. So that's one part of it, because it will always be there. The people who found it the most to change there were quite a few people. And obviously those who were immediately within our scanner, we did quite a few things, and we've already started the process. One is coaching. So a couple of us are certified coaches, including myself. And in the last 3 to 4 weeks, I've started coaching some young managers myself on certain skill sets. We brought in an external coach to coach some senior leaders. He has got a lot more experience, 10, 15 years experience in coaching CEOs and stuff like that. So he's got that innate ability to be able to, sort of pivot mindsets which are resistant to change. And we've had considerable success, initial successes, especially with the young managers who are always open to looking at things differently. I've personally had some success with it. We've had some success with coaching as well. And we've encouraged one-to-one conversations. I know in this current environment, physical one-to-one contact is not possible. But one of the things that I did sort of make a note of, Viju, about the organization of the future is the ability of HR to have either on the board or be skilled themselves in coaching, counseling, and having a psychologist on board. Because just like a cricket team needs a psychologist, in today's environment, senior leadership needs serious psychological counseling. For instance, in our organization, we do 65% of employees are women. They have their own set of challenges. Many of them are mothers. There are mothers who are leading stores, even during COVID, and they had the courage to come to work, but they went back with a lot of stress, and guilt that they might carry the infection back home. So how do you deal with that? How do you deal with that fear that is now lurking behind corners every day in people's lives? So change is going to always be there. COVID is not going away. It's going to become a part of life. And I think we need to ensure that people who are most resistant to change need to be counseled, helped along, hold their hands and give them more responsibility and help them see their own potential, but they're not able to see it. So a lot of that, I think HR has to play a big role in facilitating this. And for them to facilitate this change, they themselves have to change and move with the times.
Thank you. Thanks, Dhruv. Thank you. Those are wonderful words. And I think key points there is times are changing and we need to change. So I think we've run out of time at this point of time. So let me thank all my panelists on this reasonably wide-ranging topic, emerging business models and the HR imperatives. You've got time ahead of you to be able to reflect on the thoughts that have been expressed. Thank you very much, Vishak, Dev, Gunjan, Mohit, Dhruv, and we had to let Manish go off because he had an urgent call. So, and Manish also was part of this. Thank you very much for making this an interactive, hopefully educative, and finally, at the end of the day, a tone setter for the rest of the organization. Thank you all.